So we know all life has evolved from a common ancestor, and what actually happens when we start to diverge from that is we see evolution of different species when we change the frequency of alleles in a population. So when there are selection pressures that exist, basically that changes how frequently, say, a blue-eyed gene exists in a population if the blue-eyed gene is less or more favourable. And so that's the same said there when we say the allele frequency in that picture there is that we've got mice 50% that they've got the darker fur colour and 50% of the lighter fur colour. And so we've got an equal proportion in the population of each allele being represented. What happens is, in this particular instance, we have a selection pressure of foxes, which decreases the frequency of the darker fur allele existing in that environment. And so we can still see that through random mutation and through sexual reproduction means and things like that, that some of the mice actually have the uppercase A allele, which is the lighter fur, and the lowercase a allele, which is a darker fur. In that second picture, we've got two of those mice that contain that dominant and recessive gene. But we still see then that overall the double recessive gene, or the allele of the darker fur, becomes less prevalent in that society. Eventually, what ends up happening is we start to see in the third generation we've got none of those darker furred ones existing anymore. We've got a couple of heterozygous, or capital A lowercase a, so the light fur and the dark fur gene, or variations of that allele that still exist in that population, but there's no actual black mice that exist. So theoretically, in the fourth generation, if the last two mice there with the capital and lowercase a were to mate together, they could theoretically produce a darker furred mouse. But unless the selection pressure goes away or is changed, that darker fur one's going to be actually preyed upon quite quickly because it's less camouflaged. And so we are literally seeing there how the frequency of alleles can change in the given environment due to the selection pressure. And that's something you need to be comfortable in talking about, frequency of alleles changes due to a selection pressure. Now, I guess I've just talked about that in terms of natural selection from a selection pressure, but there are two other mechanisms. So we get genetic variation existing from mutation. All right, that's a key thing that we learned in topic 1. Random mutation, if it's not disastrous, can go on and exist in successive generations. We also get sexual reproduction existing as well, which changes basically the frequency of alleles. And then we can also see another mechanism which we'll talk about in genetic drift that actually occurs that will also change the frequency of alleles in a population. All right, and so this is just another example of what I've just spoken about, but again, really comfortable is what you need to be in talking about how frequency of alleles will change when we have selection pressures, how frequency of alleles might change through sexual reproduction, through independent assortment and crossing over, and how also mutation can drive that as well. The last concept that I want to talk about though is genetic drift here. So genetic drift differs from natural selection because it is a random event that changes the frequency of alleles in a population. And so these chance events, so let's say a bushfire or a massive deforestation event or something like that, what that does, or even migration of an organism, that changes how that population exists straight away. So that will change the frequency of alleles in a population. And so this is not driven by selective pressure in the same way. This is a random event that theoretically you could say is somewhat a selection pressure, but it's not that favourable genes are the ones that survive. So when we deforest land, it's not that we're not sitting there going, oh, all the lighter furred mice are able to survive because they can survive deforestation. No, it's a random event that actually occurs, and it's either the favourable or the unfavourable genes that may or may not survive. So genetic drift is a random chance occurrence, whereas natural selection is non-random. We can say that this has a bottleneck effect on an environment, so this will permanently change an environment. So the former population here has a lot of genetic diversity. A random freak event causes the frequency of all the alleles to become much lower, and then the new population can only survive and grow from that. So that's a massive change. And the last slide here I'll let you read that one yourself.